believe in the ripple effect.
What's up, everybody? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. I'm your host, Ricardo Vrendes. It's been a little bit since my last podcast. I'm so glad to be back. There's always this sense of, I don't know, like I'm accomplishing something or I'm doing something, contributing something when I finish these podcasts. Even today, I have Matt Farah from the Smoking Tire and also the Watch and Listen podcast. Look it up. Both shows you can find on YouTube. They're also podcasts, so you can find them on iTunes and everywhere you find podcasts. And one is on cars, and the other one is on watches. And today, you know, you'd think that we'd spend all day talking about watches and cars because that's what his podcasts are about. But like usual Ripple Effect podcast style, I go wherever the conversation takes us, and I think it's a good thing because we end up talking about some really interesting stuff. I think you get to see a side of the guests that maybe you don't get to see on other shows. I love talking about cars and I love talking about watches, but there's also a whole lot of other things that I'm super curious about and interested with. And I know most of my guests are also much more complex than just the couple topics that you usually hear them talk about. So it's fun to kind of dive into that. So please check out his work. As you guys know, on our YouTube channel, RV Theory 6, or just look up the Ripple Effect Podcast. You'll be able to see me and Matt have the conversation because anytime somebody calls in using video, you can actually see the video version of the podcast and see us have the conversation. And remember, I have a Patreon page also if you guys want to contribute to the show. So far, not much, but honestly, like I tell you guys over and over again, I don't really care. This is a passion project. I really enjoy what I'm doing. It's fun to have these conversations with interesting people. And like I told Matt in the beginning of the show, it's kind of amazing that I am just a dude who has this passion for having conversations with interesting people and hoping that it sparks interesting conversations and people actually come on. So it always boggles my mind, and it always blows my mind even more how many people listen and find this stuff interesting. So I can't thank you guys enough. Everybody who throughout the years have been listening and contributing by sharing the show and posting it on different websites and different social media sites, which I always say is equally as important as contributing anything financially because money's tight, and I know it's hard for anybody to contribute. So just spreading the conversations and the guests' work and the conversation we have on the show to me is much more important. So if you can, please do that. And of course, follow me on Twitter, RV Theory 6. Follow me on Instagram, RV Theory 6. Follow me on Facebook. You can go to the Ripple Effect Podcast Facebook page, or you can find my personal page. Throw me a friend request. That's it. See you on the next one. Peace.
All right, there you go.
Awesome. Thanks for being with me, Matt.
Okay?
Yeah, I hear you great. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Is it okay? Are you not getting feedback because I'm not wearing headphones, right? You okay in that regard?
No, I hear you great. I don't know what you're using for a mic, but it sounds good.
I'm using a Yeti mic, but I'm not wearing headphones, so the sound is coming out of the speakers. So I just wanted to make sure you're not getting like a feedback loop.
Yeah, usually you do, but no, I'm not getting it. So.
All right. Well, take it.
Awesome. If I do, I'll let you know. But yeah, thanks for being with me, Matt. I'm a huge fan. It's always amazing to me, the people that I can convince to come on and talk to me and doing these podcasts. And, you know, it's I love your story because you were just a dude who had a YouTube channel and you just kept putting out content. And now you're one of the most familiar and well-known names in car reviews and personalities, and your watch podcast is awesome. I love that. And
oh, thanks.
Yeah, I'm well, there's one thing I wanted to open this podcast up with, because I think it's an interesting thing. There's this link between like people who enjoy cars and watches, and I don't know if you heard, I'm sure you did because everybody did, the Musk on recently on the Joe Rogan podcast.
Oh my God, it drove me nuts, dude. I was so annoyed when I heard him talking about the watches. I was so annoyed.
Well,
especially because,
What annoyed you? What was it?
Well, when Joe was saying that his Rolex watch would go 5 minutes out every 5 months, and Elon was going, "Wow, that's broken. That's wrong." It's like, actually, that watch is operating pretty much within spec. That's about a second a day.
Well, that was kind of that little part of the conversation was kind of weird to me, because he's like, oh, I would show up to Rolex every 3 months, and it was like a couple minutes off, and I'm like, you do realize how amazing that is, that watch is only like a minute off every 3 months. Like, to me that seemed, and then he was talking about, oh, I'll just have to go there, and or I think Joe Rogan was kidding about, oh, you got to go there and teach them how to do it or whatever. And I'm like, wait, you're talking about Rolex here? I'm pretty sure they know what the fuck they're doing.
They have figured it. I think that most folks, and it's so interesting that you mentioned this specific conversation, because I was at physical therapy today, because I have really just my body's destroyed. So I go to physical therapy constantly. And my physical therapist has a Swiss watch. It's a Baume Mercier. It's actually a similar watch to an older one that I have. And he was complaining that the thing gains, a minute or two a week. And I was like, dude, that's like, it's a little fast, but like, it ain't broken. And, a mechanical watch is going to require a little bit of adjusting once in a while. And, the funny thing about I love Joe Rogan, by the way, and I had a great time on his podcast. I know him reasonably well, and he's a good guy. And I think he might have been hamming it up a little bit about the Rolex, but like, he should know that 5 minutes in 5 months is within spec. And also a Rolex Sea Dweller, which was the watch he was talking about, the date needs to be reset every month. So regardless of the time, you have to reset something on that watch once a month. So you might as well recalibrate the time, while you're at it.
Yeah. And I have automatic watches, and I don't have them all in one of those things that keep them, winders. And so I don't mind. It's not that much work. You wear them, but then you set them, and it's not really that.
No, I have one winder. I got like 10 watches, and I have one winder, and I have a watch called an IWC perpetual calendar, and the perpetual calendar, you have to keep it in a winder, because resetting it isn't just a nightmare, because the perpetuals, it's like date, day, month. It's got a four-digit year, and so the cool thing is, this watch is like a crazy math machine, and it keeps all this information for the next 400 years. It knows all the leap years. It knows 30, 31 days. It knows all this stuff for the next 400 years, and that's like amazing. But yeah, you do have to keep that one in a winder. But a regular automatic watch, it's better to just let it die and then reset it and start it. It's like, would you leave your car's engine, idling in the garage to keep, the clock set properly? And, the truth is you could let it sit there, and then hi Pico, did you see my cat just come in?
I see.
I have 3 cats, so you may see more than one. You can sit down back there, but it's better to just let it sit and then wind it back up again.
Yeah, that's what I do. The weird thing, well, the part of the conversation that I thought was interesting was the fact that he was talking about how much he loves the mechanics. They were admiring just all the, and I think that's one of those reasons why there's something classy about a analog watch. I have a Jag XJR, and it has a digital dash, which I'm not a huge fan of, but I've learned to deal with. but and then it still has this analog, clock in the middle, and it's one of those things where just like there's something classy about it. There's something, and I wonder, and I think if it's something bigger than that, like I think the last time you were on the Rogan podcast in April, you guys were talking about the future and technology and all this stuff, and it's constantly as we get closer to, I guess, where almost everything we enjoy is digital, where it's your phone, it's video games, it's whatever. I feel like we're trying to hold on to this analog world, and it's
well, some things are nice the old way, and I'm not anti-technology or anti-progress, by any means. And I like driving Teslas, and I like my iPhone, and there's neat bits of tech I like, but there are certain things where it's very satisfying to do them the old way. To me, a watch, an old car, knives and things like that are fun. It's fun to do it the old way. I like that.
Well, I think it's also because those things are made out of like materials that are all like a part of this earth. It's almost like, not to get all hippie George Carlin on you, but it's, this idea that we're all like one, this idea, it kind of makes sense, right? Like you die, you disintegrate, you go into the earth, eventually
come back to the diamond.
all these things get kind of reused and recycled. We're all like, so if that's the case, then it kind of makes sense that there's this connection, like people talk about walking on grass barefooted and all this stuff. And there's this connection to mechanics and stuff like that. And then when you look at like the digital world, like your phone, like where does that exist? It's this, like if my mother, who, is was born in Portugal, so my parents are old school Europeans, have no idea how email or internet works. She asked me, she tries to explain to me like, okay, what is, where's the internet and how do you see the email from your phone and also from the computer? And it's like, I don't know how to explain to her. Like it exists nowhere and everywhere, and there's something, I think, we lose something, and I feel like there's a reason why younger and younger crowds are getting into like IPAs and analog watches, cigars. Well,
it's a craftsmanship thing, right? It's about people, human beings making things. It's not about writing a software algorithm that programs a machine that then, feeds you information. It's about humans shaping metal and doing math and making gears or combining liquids and combining ingredients, and so I think that in the last 20 years, we've had such an onslaught of advancement and technology and all this craziness that it's important for some of us, me certainly, it's important for others too, to mentally slow down and try to reconnect to, like you said, the earth. But in terms of, I don't necessarily need to feel my feet in the grass, although I enjoy that feeling. But I like the satisfaction of knowing that my watch is powered by springs and gears, and I like cooking foods that were grown locally, and I like drinking beers that weren't made by some giant conglomerate. I like beers that were made by 6 dudes, or girls or whatever. I like to go local. I like to keep the level of crafts. I like leathers. I'm a big fan of handmade leather goods in general. So yeah, I can relate to all of that stuff. The world is so fast around you that analog stuff slows you down and forces you to consider how you interact with physical objects.
Yeah, and I think there's something about, you think about like since the beginning of creating alcohol and smoking tobacco or any plant you smoke, like there's and having feasts, and people, like, you think about it, before there was digital entertainment, before there was social media, video games, all this stuff, what people did for enjoyment after a long day of work or hunting or gathering or surviving is people got together and they ate together, or they drank together, and these senses, right? So these things, like a lot of these enjoyments, they involved basically things that we neglect now, our senses, our smells, our tastes, and stuff like that. And now it seems like, I got into cigars some years ago and got into whiskeys and bourbons and stuff, and initially I didn't really know anything about cigars or bourbons or wines or anything like that, but I love the idea of getting together with friends, smelling, tasting, and I heard you talk about this, and because my wife and I do the exact same thing every night, and actually after this podcast, when she doesn't work, we pop open a bottle of wine, we put the kids to sleep before it's hard to do, but we put the kids to sleep, then we have dinner, and sometimes that means we have a really late dinner, but it's nice because we can pop open a bottle of wine, we can enjoy our dinner, and I love the idea of just we buy random bottles, let's try this, try that, and then it's a journey, right? Like it's like, what is it going to smell like? What is it going to taste like? What is it going to taste like in 5 minutes when it gets some air?
Yeah.
And so it's these senses that you look at, like a lot of the younger generation, not to sound, I guess, like an old fart, these young guy people, but they neglect those senses. Like a lot of their entertainment has to do with with digital stuff. I mean, there's kids today that literally can spend all day on YouTube, which I guess is
kids today.
Yeah, but and so I think there's this transition, but it's almost like as we're slowly going down that path to the digital world, a little part of us is still trying to hold on to that analog world because it brings us some sense of enjoyment. It seems realer than anything I think the digital world can give you, and so I think that's why there's, like you said, like I think you're seeing this emergence of people eating foods locally. I'm a big I go, if there's a mom and pop hole in the wall restaurant, I'm going there first. I'm not going to any chain restaurant. I'd rather give them my money. I know there's appreciation for what they're doing and all that stuff. So so what's your feelings on like this, talking about the future, about the fact that one day there's going to be self-driving cars, and I'm sure I live in Massachusetts, but I'm sure all over the U.S. it's probably a reoccurring theme where the younger crowds are getting, like when we were growing up, like you couldn't wait to be 16 and get your license, you couldn't wait to get your first car and your permit, and now it seems like there's a lack of that. What do you think about that?
I don't see it that way. I think there is a lack of money, and that's why kids don't have cars as much. I think there is a lot of enthusiastic young people that would really like to have a car or a nice car, and they don't have money. I think that the rich are very, very rich, and so rich that the Rolex stores are all sold out, and the crazier and Singer can sell $100 million 911s, and you go to a Cars and Coffee and there's 6 Paganis. That's just craziness. And there is a lot of enthusiasm for cars among younger people, but I think there's a lot of issues with younger people being able to fund those things. I also think that in general, the appeal, our parents, the baby boomers, fled to the suburbs, and in the suburbs you can't walk anywhere. You got to drive everywhere. And so driving meant freedom, because you really couldn't walk 15 miles to your friend's house just because you felt like it. So you did need a car. Now, younger families are more concentrated in cities. The suburbs aren't so popular anymore. And so basically, and then you have Uber and Lyft. And so the idea of getting a taxi or a variant of a taxi is easy. It's traceable. There's a digital footprint of it. It's not call a number and maybe a guy will show up and maybe he won't. It's all so easy that only young car enthusiasts will want cars, because if you see the idea of a car as a headache because it's expensive, because you live in the city or you can walk to stuff, and a car is an added burden, sure, that's going to be the sharing economy, and maybe one day that'll mean autonomous pods or whatever the hell. But if you go to Silicon Valley, like my friend Alex Roy says, where supposedly the future is now, right? Bro, Ferraris, Lambos, McLarens, modified Mustangs, Evos, S2000s. I mean, I have an apartment in Silicon Valley that is, it's up high, and I can see sort of the town we're in, And I hear engines revving. I hear engines revving all day and all night. I hear people going by in first gear at 6,000 RPM constantly. I think in the land of the leading development of this, it's not a city that's jam-packed with Priuses. And granted, there's enough of those, but in Silicon Valley, car culture is popping off. And the people who got money are spending it on supercars. They're not spending it on autonomous. I don't know where I was necessarily going with that, but the market for high-end supercars has never been stronger than it is right now. And to me, that says people with money, want to own their car, not share it with folks. Sharing is for people who can't afford to own. And they want to go fast and they want to make noise.
And do you think, obviously there's been a lot of millionaires and billionaires coming out of Silicon Valley. Do you think a lot of it's just they're buying cars because they actually love cars? Or do you think it's just one of those things where, really? Yeah, you don't think it's just like, because I
think there are not a lot of people. I mean, look, there are some cars that are exotic cars that can be used every day, right? You can buy a Ferrari 488 and it's a relatively normal thing to use every day. It's not like 20 years ago where it was a huge pain in the ass. You can daily a Ferrari or a Huracan or an R8 or whatever. Not to mention stuff like the AMG GT or a Bentley or something like that. Cars are more daily drivable than they've ever been, the supercars. But at the same time, I think that stereotype of the guy who just buys the McLaren so that, to meet girls or so that people look at him or whatever, I think that is an overblown stereotype. And I find that most of the people that I interact with, either virtually or in real life, that own $200,000 cars are passionate about them. Their passion may not be the same as a guy who's building a 69 Nova in his garage, but it's still passion. I think the myth of the dude who drives an exotic and knows absolutely nothing about it and just wants the newest, flashiest thing, I don't really think that's a very real person.
Yeah. I mean, I go to car shows, and sometimes I obviously if a guy rolls up in a McLaren or a Ferrari or something like that, your first instinct is to go up and talk to him and take a look at the car. And you're right. I think most often than not, they know a shitload about the car, and and they're usually a Ferrari guy or they're a Aston Martin guy, and it's not their first one. And so, yeah, you're probably right. I mean, that's probably the case. I mean, you deal with these guys all the time. So, I mean, the thing about cars,
I find there are more true enthusiasts out there than there are posers, and some of those really rich guys are true enthusiasts. Yeah, for sure. Most of them are.
And I've heard Rogan say, and I'm also a huge Rogan fan. I actually started this podcast initially because I was a big fan of his, and I became a big fan of yours. I tell my buddies, I'm like, I think Matt's like the Rogan of cars, because you're what you see is what you get. When they hear you talk, it's very casual. You never are putting on a persona, and I think that's why people love you so much.
That's true.
Yeah.
Thanks. That's true.
Yeah. And I mean, I've had Dan Carlin on. I've had Danielle Benyelli, a lot of people that I've been exposed to through Rogan, including a huge fan of yours, and you've been on the show a few times too. And now I lost my fucking train of thought. I shouldn't have went on that rant. But
it's okay, no problem. Start it over.
But what I was going to say in regards to see, so I have this theory, right? Like, so we're talking about our generation, the way we grew up. When we were growing up, you're right. Getting a car was this sense of freedom. Like, I finally didn't have to ask my mother for a ride to the mall or go pick up my friends or whatnot. But I feel like today, cars and money, there's kids growing up and there's a lack of I guess desire for it like we have, and I think a lot of it was a sense of freedom. Like when we were growing up, like if I wanted the new Iron Maiden album or I wanted a new Metallica album or whatever Sepultura album, like I needed money. So I had this desire that like everything I enjoyed in life required money, and freedom required a car, and to leave, to go pick up my friends, go to the mall, do whatever. So both those things, I feel like now the younger generation, they're growing up in a world where literally if you have Wi-Fi, you can go to any coffee shop and get Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
You have access to movies, music, lectures, your videos, my podcast, your podcast, all this stuff. So they're growing up with this almost like this lack of a feeling like they need money in a way that we grew up because of that, because they necessarily don't to get all the entertainment and things they enjoy like we did. Do you think there's any truth to that?
I mean, I don't hang out with a lot of kids, so I don't necessarily have a good gauge of what the kids today are doing. I mean, I do know that if you are not old enough to remember a time before smartphones, you probably don't have the same needs to be physically in the same room as someone. You can have 10 people hanging out on a thread on iMessage or whatever, and you can talk all night that way. You don't I'm 36, so I'm sorry. I think I'm 37. No, I'm 36. I forgot how old I was. I'm 36, and so when I was younger, I could either talk on the phone to one person or be in a room full of people, and those were really my two options. And so for me, and also I am unique in that I wasn't just looking for freedom from my house. For me, driving and the act of piloting a car was very, very important, and getting good at that and being the guy that does that. I was sober in high school because my parents put the fear of God in me about if I ever got caught drinking, driving, smoking weed, driving, whatever, that they would, I paid for my car, but that they would take my insurance away and they would take my license away. And I was so afraid of that I became the designated driver, for all my friends. And I drove them around to parties, and I looked older, so I would buy them all beer and charge them, 100% markup on the beer. and then I would drive them around, and they would get drunk, and I enjoyed driving and playing music. And that was my thing. So I don't really know about, I can see how if you have a supercomputer, like Elon Musk said, the intelligence of a child is no longer just the child. It's the child plus the child's ability to access information via the smartphone that's pretty much glued to their hand. And so I think that we are raising a generation of what will probably be incredibly smart, incredibly resourceful people. But I think in general there may be less of an interest in driving, but I think car enthusiasm among young people is alive and well. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I definitely, I know quite a few guys who owns like auto bodies, and we're always car guys, and people, you talk to people at car shows, and they're talking about how their kids are they're like, my kid's fucking 17 and he doesn't really care to get his license. He's like, I'm like pressuring him to get, and like you said, maybe a lot of it is the Uber, all these other ways of getting around.
Yeah, I mean, if you live somewhere where driving isn't fun, if you live in the right place, Colorado, Malibu, Southern Connecticut, driving can be really fun. Just getting from A to B, where I grew up in Southern Connecticut on the New York border, the roads that people live on are rad. It wasn't like here in Los Angeles where I live now, the city is just a shitty grid with lights every couple of 100 yards. You can never go faster than 30 miles an hour. And then we have our roads, up in the mountains, but the day-to-day driving sucks. And so if I was a kid and I was living in an urban environment, I wouldn't be excited to drive at all. All the cars look like eggs. They're all the kids aren't driving Hellcats. The kids are driving sucky little hybrids or cheap, old Jettas or whatever it is. They're not driving fun cars, and they're not driving them in fun ways if they live in the city. So to that end, yeah, the appeal of car, come, and then a car just shows up and then you just leave. And now instead of buying this car and filling it with gas and washing it and keeping it clean and whatever, you have that transportation on demand. And so that that probably makes a lot of sense if you have not been shown a type of car enthusiasm, that resonates with you.
Yeah. I wonder, do you think self-driving cars is just eventually it's going to happen regardless if there are tons
I think it's going to be a very long time, probably not in our lifetimes.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, if you banned gasoline cars, as I'm sure. Actually, I've said this before, and Elon brought it up. I hate to keep talking about Elon on Joe Rogan, but he did bring up some points. You ban a car is a pretty resilient thing. If you banned gas cars today and only said only electric cars are allowed to be sold new from now on, it would take like 40 years to get all the gas cars off the road, or most of them to the point where it mattered. People do not want to necessarily give these things up. I don't, people in Europe don't buy small cars instead of SUVs because SUVs are because they don't want an SUV. They buy them because gas is crazy expensive and the streets are really small. So they buy a car that fits their lifestyle. And the truth is, for most Americans, not a self-driving, a car you drive yourself, powered by cheap gasoline that you can get anywhere, is still a very practical thing. And if you just look at what happens with electric cars and semi-autonomous cars when there's a disaster, a natural disaster that people are trying to get away from, nothing beats a car that you own, a tank full of gas. And so I think that, and by the way, what exactly is the difference between a shared autonomous vehicle and an Uber? Other than a person has a job. Besides that, what is really the difference? You summon a thing on your phone, it shows up, it drops you off, it leaves. And Uber is the same thing as an autonomous car, except that a guy has a job.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. That's a very good point. But
I'm not in a rush to eliminate the driver from the Uber.
Yeah, no, I'm not either. I'm just worried that eventually they're going to use the argument that it's going to cause less car accidents, it's going to be safer.
That's fucking horseshit.
Yeah.
It's not. What will cause less car accidents right now is drastically reformed driver safety. But they can't sell that. You can't, capitalism can't run on driver safety. It's not sexy. You can't sell it. That's the kind of thing where the government has to set that up. Government increasing the minimum threshold that someone can do something is not something most people would like. If you said, all right, from now on in America, our driving test is going to be as hard as it is in Finland, where fucking nobody dies in car crashes because they're all amazing drivers. Americans would fucking revolt. They like their stupid, easy driving test. They would rather roll the dice on the risks of having shitty, untrained drivers than have the government impose an inconvenience on their right to drive, which is not a right, it's a privilege, but that's neither here nor there. And so I also think Americans are very afraid, safety aside. What happens if we have autonomous cars and you go, well, obviously all autonomous cars will have to be connected into a network. That network would have to be managed by the government. Hopefully not some third party the government contracts out.
Which could happen. Yeah.
Take me to the Empire State Building. No, Matt. No. What? Driving may be a privilege, but you have the right to go anywhere you want in this country. And so I don't think Americans ever want to be in a position where their car can tell them no. And that's a possibility. I mean, maybe not a likelihood, but a possibility. So I think it would be possible to reduce some level of driver safety using autonomous cars, but not nearly as much as you would increase by just making our drivers better.
Yeah, I think there's quick decision making. If a situation happens that a computer just I don't know how you can program it to be prepared for every single possible situation that a car could get into. And yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I mean, these are conversations people have because technology is advancing so quickly and things are changing so quickly that I think people feel like, okay, this might happen quicker. But you look at it,
it's also the media, the mainstream media especially has really been derelict in their using of correct terminology regarding autonomous features, semi-autonomous features, and what autonomy versus automated means. And I think the American media, I don't know, I can't say for other countries, but the American media, with the enabling of Tesla, have done a hell of a job convincing people that the current state of semi-autonomous features are vastly more capable than they actually are.
And why do you think they're doing that?
Because it sells more cars, makes more money, gets more clicks, more capitalism.
Yeah.
Capitalism.
Well, that's kind of the argument about capitalism, because I mean, it's funny because is that Trump floating in the background?
Oh, it's my baby Trump balloon. That's my baby Russia Trump balloon.
That's hilarious. But I've heard Rogan, not to keep bringing him up, but he's talked about it where he's like, capitalism sparks innovation, and in some cases it does, but it also sparks things like I don't know if you're familiar with like the trolley car conspiracy, when all the trolley cars were. Have you heard about this? Are we talking about San Francisco or Los Angeles? Well, it was happening everywhere, where basically DuPont, Firestone, GM, and it's documented history that they bought. No, this happened in L.A. In L.A., it was Firestone and GM bought the public transit system from the city of Los Angeles, ripped all the train tracks out of the ground. We had trains in L.A. Yeah. We had actual trains, and GM and Firestone bought them out, ripped out all the train tracks, and replaced them with buses. And now we're fucked. That's capital. Well, that's my point. Like, so people, and Rogan, I mean, he's very open-minded, and like you said, he's very polite. So the guests that he has on, sometimes he does let them, share their opinions, and he doesn't fight back too much if he's not in the mood for it. But it is one of those things where I've heard him say, numerous of times, capitalism gives you, these amazing cars and these amazing technologies, but it also suppresses some technology. It also. Totally. Yeah. So, I mean, you look at what's going on with Monsanto and glyphosate, all this stuff, this technology. Look at the way we eat, for example. I've had Dr. Dominic D'Agostino on my show. He's been on the Rogan podcast, one of the leading experts in the ketogenic diet. And look at, like, all the pushback that, I get in conversation with people about it, and people are like, wait, what do you mean you can eat cholesterol? What do you mean? Because it's like the food industry and the sugar industry for so long has been telling you, like, eat sugar, if your cholesterol is high, take this pill and take that pill. And and you look at weed, for example. There's still people. Musk was smoking weed. Everybody made a big deal about that. Nobody made a big deal about him drinking whiskey. Like, we still have this propaganda that it's like, it's so, we've been convinced that, like, weed is so much worse than whiskey, and even though it's the only thing I'll say about that, and I don't give a fuck who smokes whatever weed. I live in California. I recently quit smoking weed, but up until then I smoked all the weed in the world. Like, I have no problem with anybody smoking weed, honestly. I mean, even folks who operate fucking heavy machinery, I have no problem with them smoking weed. The only place I have a problem is, and I've not been able to confirm it 100%, so I don't want to get sued for fucking libel. But I was under the impression that Tesla drug tests their employees and can fire people for smoking weed. And so I don't care who smokes weed and who doesn't smoke weed. But what I care about is when a CEO smokes weed to look cool. Meanwhile, the company can terminate lesser employees for smoking weed. That to me is really the issue. And by the way, people don't give a shit that he smoked weed because he did it on fucking video. Which, if you ask me, if you're Elon Musk, legal or not, you got to be smarter than fucking smoking weed on video. I mean, honestly, you really do. Like, that guy, like,
I don't have people. I don't have employees. I don't have fucking shareholders. It's one thing to go, nah, it's stigmatized, it's legal. It's another to really not see the bigger picture of what you might be doing. Now, I don't know. I don't follow the stock that closely, but I was told that the stock like tanked, but then came right back up like 3 days later. Yeah. So maybe it's just a whole big nothing anyway. You know, I don't really know. But I agree with you. I think alcohol is a lot more dangerous than weed. And I think that the reason weed is still Schedule 1 and alcohol isn't is a combination of people had the powers that be have not figured out how to turn enough of a profit at it yet. And also racism, left over from the Nixon administration that is, still going on today with our fucking wonderful Attorney General, Jeffrey Beauregard Sessions, who seems like just a model of rational thought.
Well, look at I've had Rick Ross on my show, Freeway Rick Ross.
Freeway Rick Ross?
Yeah, not
the real Rick Ross.
Yeah,
the real Rick Ross.
Yeah, not the fake Rick Ross. Fuck that guy. But the real Rick Ross. And look at him. I mean, this guy was selling drugs that the government was bringing in from Nicaragua, and they were locking up minorities for it. Never mind the fact that also cocaine and crack are the same fucking drug, but yet you do more time for crack than you do cocaine. Why? Because the majority of people who were doing crack were poor. And it was basically a really clever way of saying, hey, let's lock up more minorities. Yeah. And I mean, even during the Clinton administration, the 3 strikes and you're out, rule, all that stuff. It's just like they could constantly just fill up prisons and with minorities, and then they create single parent homes, which eventually the chances of success as a child is less if you have so it's like you're locking up their dads, and yet you're wondering like, hey, look, why can't they succeed? It's like, well, you're putting them in shitty situations
because his father's doing 20 years for an ounce of pot.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's proven that a minority for the same thing is more likely. Yeah. I mean, the legal system's fucking a joke anyways. If you have enough money, you can get out of anything. I mean, it's proven that if it's all a matter of how good of a lawyer you can afford. I mean, it has nothing to do with. I mean, when you hear judges and you hear people talk about like, oh, the legal system is designed to it's just, and it gives people the chance to prove that they're innocent and all this stuff. It's like that's all horseshit. Like it's all a matter of and look how many politicians are ex-lawyers. I mean, they benefit from having a very complicated legal system because they benefited when they were attorneys. Because if it's complicated, that means I have to hire somebody to fill out this fucking paperwork or figure out the loopholes, and then when they're politicians, it still benefits them. So I completely.
I'm with you on that one. Yeah. It's real fucked up. I'm glad I live in California. The good thing about me living where I live is, at the very least, I feel like I have good representation that represents like people with good values, like my congressmen and like my senators and shit from my area are good. Like so I don't have to hound them, as a concerned citizen. I follow them on Twitter and I know that they're reflecting my values. I started listening about a year ago to the Dollop podcast. You know that show?
No.
Oh, it's a good show. It's like a show about American history, but it's about like typically like particularly fucked up episodes in American history, like the kind of shit you don't really get taught in class.
Oh, that's right down my alley. Yeah.
History as told by someone other than old white people, that kind of thing. And I've learned a lot more about the crazy fucked up shit our country's done to its citizens from this one dumb podcast than from, a whole lifetime of, not a lifetime, but a half a lifetime of schooling and university and all that shit.
Well, it sounds like the Howard Zinn of podcasts.
I love Howard Zinn. I got turned on to him. You see me do that? Splash.
Yes.
I just opened a bottle of water, splash my face. There's your viral teaser clip right there. I got turned on to Howard Zinn from Eddie Vedder. I'm a massive Pearl Jam fan.
Oh my god, my co-host is his name.
There you go. See?
Oh my god.
That's my Pearl Jam tattoo.
I should have had Dave on here. So Dave literally traveled. He travels all over the world to watch him. He went to Poland. He went to Germany.
How many shows has he done?
Oh, I would have to ask him, but it's ridiculous. Like we make fun of him because we're just like, dude.
Well, tell him he's got to beat 52 because that's me.
That's So
I've been to 52 Pearl Jam shows. I just went to 51 and 52. I just did in Amsterdam in July.
Oh, that's right. 'Cause I think I saw some pictures on Instagram, and I showed him. I'm like, hey, Matt's in a Pearl Jam show in Europe, because he went to. I know he was in Poland, roughly around the World Cup, because they got eliminated.
Yes.
He's Polish, and he's like,
that was
like,
just after me, I think, as I was like the first two shows of the tour, and then I think there was like two more, and then Poland. Yeah, it was Europe, the first half of the summer, and then they did baseball stadiums in America the second half of the summer.
Yeah, he just saw him at Fenway. Yeah, he just saw him like what was it, a week ago or something like that, like at Fenway. Yeah, that's he's huge. I've only went with him once to a show. We in Connecticut. I was somewhere near the Webster Theater. We some little place when he was playing ukulele. And
Eddie Vedder solo show.
Yeah, the solo show. So we went there, and everybody was so high, and and it was I'm like, dude, I'm not high enough, because everybody's really enjoying
ukulele. Like, as much as I love Pearl Jam, I'm not a big ukulele.
Do it. Yeah, I couldn't do it. I but he's super nice. Like, everybody waited outside to meet him, and he came out. And I love Eddie Vedder because he, when he had that fight with Ticketmaster, when he, all that stuff, like when he believes in something, it's music with a meaning. It's music. That, and I think we're missing that. And
well, Eddie will say, he'll say it in interviews, and he says it sometimes between songs of the show. Some people don't like when he talks about politics or when he talks about issues. He's like, but Pearl Jam is about the music, but it's about having a little bit of fiber in your diet too. He's like, there's a lot of music out there, and if you just want yeehaw, pop, bop, bop, you can get that. But he likes to put a little fiber in your diet, he says, and I'm about that. I think he's an educated man. He's not talking out of his ass, and he does get political, but that band puts their money where their mouth is. I forget if it was Chicago Wrigley or Fenway. Oh, Seattle. It was in Seattle earlier this summer. They did this show at the Seahawks Stadium in Seattle, and they donated $11 million to the entire revenue of the show. They donated to the homeless in Seattle, and beyond that, in between the two shows, the band rallied the audience to go volunteer at these various places in Seattle, and
That's
and they
awesome.
mobilized 10,000 people to volunteer for a day and so it's one thing to talk about it, but that band walks the walk,
Well, it kind of bothers me when people, the whole LeBron James thing recently.
Oh, fucking Nike, that shit is stupid.
Yeah, but I'm a big basketball fan, and people are.
Well, I just conflated Kaepernick and Nike. Which LeBron thing are we talking about?
I'm talking about how, remember when he was going at it with Trump, and Fox News said who is he to have an
when he
opinion?
opened a school.
Yeah, and I'm just like, his school is actually helping people. Trump's school rip people off, but the thing is, like, to go back to what you said, like, the fact that people get mad because Eddie Vedder or LeBron James has an opinion on what's going on in the world, it's ridiculous to me, because it's like, then who does have a right to have an opinion? Because it's like, do we think these fucking fake ass politicians who are just basically sick? I've had Jack Abramoff on the show. Okay, I mean, I've had Roger Stone on the show twice. I know all of
really.
Yeah,
you had fucking Roger Stone on,
and I
hate Roger Stone, but I'm still kind of jealous.
Yeah.
Like, I'd like to grill Roger Stone.
Well,
like, I think he's a real shitbag, but I'd still like to grill him for an hour.
His documentary, it was funny because I had him on before his documentary came out twice. I had him on one time. I'm a big JFK assassination. I love alternate history, so I've done shows with Gerard Williams about the escape of Adolf Hitler to Argentina. I've talked about all types, and which is pretty crazy, because like when you actually look into this stuff, you realize like there's literally zero evidence that Hitler killed himself in Germany. Like, literally zero evidence. When I had Gerard Williams on, I remember telling a couple of my buddies who were like World War II buffs, and like, oh, that sounds crazy. And then Gerard Williams did that special on the History Channel, Chasing Hitler or Finding Hitler or whatever. And I'm like, dude, that's the guy who was on my podcast. I'm like, you thought like it was bullshit. I'm like, he's on. And then they do a DNA test on the bones that supposedly were Hitler. It was a female, and it wasn't even the age of his wife. So it's like,
were there ever bones? I didn't know. I thought they burned whatever was left of him.
The Soviets apparently had like a skull or something left, and it wasn't even and then there's parts in Argentina that literally like they're all they speak is
they're full of Nazis.
Yeah, they're full.
I know.
You know, and so
there's a company that, and I don't think there's any Nazis working there, but there is a company that I know pretty well, and they're called Persang in Argentina. And what they do is they service and make parts for and recreate pre-war European sports cars. And so they build like a perfect and I mean, like, they do it, they don't just, not like a Shelby Cobra, they do it like using the same methods, and they cast their own engine blocks and all this shit. Wow. And if you have a pre-war Bugatti, they are the only parts supplier left on the planet for this thing. But it's interesting that a business that serves to maintain and restore pre-war European sports cars popped up in Buenos Aires.
Yeah, that is kind of interesting. Yeah, but I mean, but it goes back to what you were saying about that podcast, that history podcast.
Yeah.
There's so, like, it's true. Like, history is written by the winners. You know, there's
the thing about that history podcast. I'm sorry to cut you off. There's people that we've heard of, and because we've heard of them, they're famous, possibly revered. But then you hear their entire life story, and you go, "This guy was a lunatic." Like, it's, from ex-presidents to generals to, pop culture type of figures, to people that I've never heard of, and then it's people, but it's also systems. One of the most, if you happen to want to check out that show, The Dollop, I think one of the best. There's a 2-parter on the entire history of Donald Trump, which none of it'll fucking surprise you, but it's all makes you want to kill yourself. And the one that I was really, really blown away by and had never heard of before was the thing on convict leasing, which is pretty much like after the end of slavery, with the 13th Amendment, no slavery except for if you've committed a crime, right? So they would take these felons, and the prisons would lease them out, the felons, to basically be forced labor. And to be slaves, again, pretty much. And the people who ran the labor camps, and yes, there were labor camps, a lot of the people who owned labor camps were like senators, and wow, real powerful politicians. And fucking prisoners would, have some crazy minor offense. The judge would get a kickback for sending them to the labor camp, and then they'd like go missing. You know what I mean? They just, like, the prisoner would just, be gone, and someone would have killed him and thrown him in a mass grave. And, like, this went on for years, and, like, thousands of people went missing. And I'd never heard a fucking peep about this in school. And, like, this was going on, like, holy shit. So, yeah, I definitely, I don't have such a rosy view of our country's history anymore. The more I learn, it's not so good.
Well, the thing is, we do a great, like, sometimes I say we're like this mild version of North Korea. Like, we talk about how everybody in North Korea is brainwashed, and I'm like, so are we, kind of. Like, we have this idea that, like, this country, it's funny, I just went to Long Island for a wedding, and I just got back.
I'm so sorry.
and I have some family there that's, like, super conservative, and it's like, and I remember growing up, every time I used to go to their house, like, Fox News was on, and I'm just like, oh, these people are a little crazy, and I love them, and they're great people, but the second you start talking to them about politics, it's like socialism is like, they just, every other word is like, damn socialist, capitalist is why things are so great, and blah blah blah. And I'm like, hey, do you like they're my cousin, their son is a fireman, and I'm a firefighter, and I'm like, you do realize that's kind of like a socialist idea, right? The idea that we all contribute as a society for this one, this one thing. I'm like, having police officers is a socialist idea. We all contribute as a society for this this one thing, and same thing with getting our roads paved. I'm like, are any of these things bad? I'm like, well,
that's where the whole libertarian argument breaks down. I deal with libertarians way more than I fucking want to, and they're all fuck no taxes, and I go, what road did you drive on to get here? Like, if what if this building catches on fire? Are you going to put it out yourself? Like, we need things as a society.
Yeah. Well, the answer is somewhere in the middle.
And fucking roads and utilities. Like, I don't know, you go live in a tent in the middle of the desert, be a libertarian. But if you take advantage of even the most basic things that society has to offer, you gotta be aware of who paid for that.
Yeah, and the answer usually lies somewhere in the middle. I mean, they like to make everything black and white, but the answer is usually somewhere in the gray area. I mean, yes, government isn't always good. I've had actually Adam Kokesh on with Hunter Motz. I don't know if you know either one of them, but it's.
I'm sorry, I don't.
But Hunter, who Brian Callen is. Joe's buddy.
The comedian Brian Callen?
Yeah. Brian Callen does a show called Mixed Mental Arts. It used to be called the Brian Callen Show, and Hunter Motz is his best friend who does a show with him. But I had him on with Adam Kokesh, who's a libertarian, and they both are past guests, friends of mine that I've made from the show, and I'm like, hey, do you guys are willing to come on and kind of debate and have like a friendly discussion about it? So we did a 2-parter, and yeah, I mean, you look at it like they both make very good points, but both break down at points. And I think that, the answer does lie somewhere in the middle. Yeah, there's the argument that the government gets too big. It starts taking your rights away. I mean, obviously it starts spying on you. I've had Thomas Drake on, the NSA whistleblower. Like, yeah, that's a huge fucking deal that every time we're on social media, we're just giving away algorithms and information, and that's all being used, and the government is working with
I read a quote that was like, who needs spying? Everyone gives everything away on the internet. It's like,
you're absolutely right.
He's like, we don't need to look into your shit. You're just going to put it out there and not even think about where it might go, which I think is fair.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely. There's a documentary called Terms and Services May Apply, and it's all about how we're always agreeing to these terms and services and the things that we're agreeing to. And not just that, the fact that these terms and services change without us knowing. And people have actually done like screenshots of like, okay, this is what I agreed with. You changed this and never asked me to agree to it again, and people have been caught to that. But you're right, like, but this goes back to like the younger generation coming up. Like, this becomes the normal now. Like, we grew up in a world where like, if we told people, hey, if somebody's going in your mailbox making photocopies of your mail and putting it back in your mailbox, you'd be like, what the fuck, that's fucked up. But but they're doing it basically online, and we're okay with it. It's like there's this detachment. Like, it's almost like we don't know they're doing it, it's okay, or we become so conditioned to accept it that it's like the first time you hear your phone's listening to you, you're like, what the fuck, my phone's listening to my conversations, and now it's like, okay, yeah, my phone's listening to my conversations. So,
it's the amount of privacy that we have willingly traded for convenience is pretty staggering. And I'm guilty of it too. I don't have a fucking piece of tape over my webcam, and I use Amazon. They have my credit card. I'm not by any means pretending to be holier than thou. I'm happy I don't have a Facebook page. I can't be hacked because I don't have a Facebook page. So yeah, but I mean, I think we give a lot of ourselves on the internet, and a lot is taken from us, without us really knowing. I've found personal details about myself on websites that I didn't really willingly give anybody, but I bought something from somebody and they sold my data. Fuck you gonna do? I wanted that thing and I wanted it shipped to my house, and I probably could have found a way to buy it somewhere off the internet, but I wanted it brought to me. And so I have to live with the consequences of that. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, these services are free, but they're not really free. I mean, free is nothing's free.
Yeah,
nothing's free.
I'll
tell you, my fiance works at Facebook, and so I've been to Facebook, and I eat their free breakfast and all that shit. And every time I walk around that crazy complex in Menlo Park, I'm just like, damn. Our data is valuable.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, so
I was like, this dope ass breakfast I'm eating with 2 different kinds of bacon. My data paid for that shit.
Yeah, well, luckily yours personally did, because you're not on Facebook.
Mine personally didn't. No, I did not get the Russian bots. I did not get the anti-Hillary messages or any of that shit.
But what's your opinion? So this goes into another interesting question, talking about Facebook. is and you being a YouTuber, what's your opinion on the censorship? Like, you see things like things, because even like I have this opinion that regardless how ridiculous the conversation or the opinion, they should all be heard, and it's about the wisdom of crowds. Like, I think that in one way, libertarians kind of have it right, where it's just like you shouldn't, you let your dollar be be your voice. Like, okay, if you don't like what a company's doing or what they're saying, then don't fucking buy the product. Like, we shouldn't have the government just pick and choose, or corporate, I guess, that's where it's kind of a blurry line, because even though it's kind of a monopoly in social media, where it's just like, yeah, you have other social media sites, but really, like, everybody's on Facebook.
No, you don't really. It's there's two schools of thought. One is, if Facebook bans Alex Jones, is that censorship, or is that a private company kicking them off their platform, right?
Exactly.
Or not a private company, but a private business if it's a public company. But, I ping pong on it. Honestly, I really do. On the one hand, I think Alex Jones is a very extreme example. I mean, Alex Jones didn't get banned for saying crazy shit. He got banned for specifically sicking crazy people on Sandy Hook shooting victims. So I don't have a lot of sympathy for Alex Jones. He has a history of threatening people and inciting his psycho band of followers to be violent and threatening towards people that do not deserve it. So I don't have a lot of sympathy for him. On the other hand, I do think that social media is kind of a public utility at this point, and it probably should be treated maybe a little bit like that in terms of First Amendment rights, but also in terms of maybe some government oversight in terms of, where are their advertising dollars coming from? Should you be allowed to accept ad dollars from shell companies based in foreign countries and fucking Tenerife or wherever this money's flowing in from, I think that some oversight would probably be good on that level. And I do think that, there is no alternative to Facebook. There is no real alternative to Twitter. There's really no alternative to Instagram. I think once these companies achieve a certain size, they become the only game in town. They're big enough to buy up anyone who might compete with them in the early stages of the company's development. And so I think some regulation of them, like utilities, is not the worst thing. I also feel this way about a lot of capitalism. I think there are fundamental problems with capitalism that can be worked around with fair, effective regulation. I think that this is just my opinion, but I think that, capitalism's great, but you shouldn't allow BP to fucking dump oil in the ocean, and go, well, climate science isn't settled yet, so fuck it, let's just dump this shit. And it's like, well, maybe not, but shouldn't we give the environment the benefit of the doubt? That's sort of the thing. It's like, even if us dumping shit isn't the main cause of global warming, it ain't helping.
Yeah, it's not good. Yeah.
So I think that capitalism, I think, is in general a good system, but I think things like healthcare, I think things like resources to deal with the homeless, the sick, the destitute, the elderly, could be implemented in a more socialist way where, I'm pretty rich, dude. I got a lot more money than I need, and I'm just speaking for myself. I wouldn't mind paying more. And the knee-jerk response to that is, well, just give all your fucking money away. No, that's stupid. Just give your money. That's dumb. What I want is for a program to exist where they go, look, your taxes are going to go up 10% or 15% or even 20%. But you're going to have health insurance. You're sick, you just walk in, you get health insurance. It means that, and not even just me, it means that, it drives me fucking nuts. Do you know how many GoFundMes people send me for their sick relatives? What kind of a society is this where if someone gets sick, they're going to lose their house if they can't get 1,000 strangers to donate them $20 each. Like, what kind of a civilized country is that? That's just crazy.
Dude, medical bills are a huge deal. I mean, I've dislocated
aren't they the largest cause of bankruptcy for people who make less than 250 grand or something like that?
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, you think about, I've dislocated my shoulder twice. I fractured my arms. I've had my bit of injuries, and literally, like, anytime I get hurt, I purposely do not go to the hospital if I know like I don't have to, because I'm like, just that ambulance is gonna fucking kill me. Just that.
I had to have back surgery off of insurance, like an actual spine surgery. And if my parents weren't very well off, my parents are very well off. My dad is a business genius. He came from very little and now is worth a ton of money. And if I didn't have that, they had to write a check for $125,000. Or else what? Or else I'm in pain for the rest of my life.
Well, that's kind of the argument that I make, because you hear people talk about how, like, oh, why should I work my ass off, and why should I give all my money to people who want to be lazy, this and that. And one thing I think that a lot of times it's unfortunate that if you're raised by shitheads, you're probably going to be a shithead. Like, and it's a cycle. I mean, like, there's
shitheads beget shitheads.
Yeah, and guess what? Those parents that are shitheads were also raised by some other shithead parents, and it's this vicious cycle. And I agree that maybe just giving them money, like, doesn't necessarily get them motivated to work or whatever, but not doing anything also doesn't help. And I also think that, like, society's only as strong as its weakest link, and I don't want people who are hungry just robbing me or robbing anybody else. Like, I'd rather them be like, okay, maybe they're shitheads, but at least they're not hungry and homeless and robbing everybody. So to me, it's like, you have to do something. You have to break the cycle, and it's not as simple as saying, like, okay, you just go to work, you shit. It's like you said.
No, I think that the while, there's a couple of people that are on collecting welfare and not working and going, here's my free check. I think that is a very minor, people that are on these programs are on them because they need them. They have, whether they have children or they have issues, and most of them work. Most of them work shittier jobs than we work, for less money than we, and they go home tired, and they put on their fucking Walmart uniform or whatever it is, and these people got it tough. Rents are higher than they've ever been. Wages are pretty stagnant. It's money doesn't go so far anymore, and we've not done a good job of taking care of the poorest among us, and a small percentage of very wealthy people have used that to their advantage and become almost dynasty-like on the backs of that.
Yeah, I mean, look at the Waltons who own Walmart. I mean, literally what they do is the people who work for them make so little that they have to live off social. Yeah. So it's like, but these are capitalists who and it's like, but yet they're just taking advantage by there's even a thing, I remember seeing a thing that was called a peasant insurance. They had this thing called peasant insurance.
That sounds horrible.
Yeah, it is horrible. So if somebody dies while they're employed by Walmart, they get this money to help them hire somebody, while to give them time to hire somebody to replace them. So you'd hear these stories about people that are like, my wife, or my husband worked for Walmart, they passed away, I'm stuck with all this debt that I have to pay on my own, and Walmart's making money off,
they've got an insurance policy that's like a gap insurance to cover them until they can find a replacement for your dead ass.
Yeah, it's crazy, and so people use these terms like socialism and all this stuff, and you're right, it's not perfect, but you know what? There's other countries that could look at our country and say capitalism's not working, obviously, because we have some of the worst income inequality as ever, and then you do hear the counter argument, and I like to look at all perspectives. My parents were I was born on a farm in Portugal. My parents, like your father and your parents, I'm sure, worked their way up, worked their ass off to have what they have, and 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 people are like, well, look, there's people who did come from nothing and then succeeded. But I also think certain people have advantage. You have advantage because it's like your dad had a good working habit. He probably came from you have grandparents who gave him morals and taught him to work hard, pay it off. Like if you don't have that, you're never gonna get and if those shitheads were raised by your parents or my parents, they'd probably be hardworking people, or they would be hardworking people who'd be more successful. So I think it's very easy to point the finger and saying I don't want to share this and that. But you know what? If we're all on a fucking island and there's only a handful of us, and somebody had a kid that was born with no limbs, we wouldn't be like, you know what? That's socialism if we all pitch in and help that motherfucker. He should just figure his way. There are some people who are just less fortunate, and we shouldn't just leave people hanging. I mean, in Europe, when your parents get old, you take care of them. Here, when your parents get old, you throw them in an old home and say, fuck you, I got to go to work, I got to make money, So I think there's something, we've gotten so obsessed with the financial thing of constantly chasing the goal of financially getting ahead that we've lost everything else, like what's really important. And that's why you see this epidemic of people on pills and self-medicating with drugs and alcohol and whatnot, and they're unhappy because I think there's something lost, and like capitalism has told you the path to success and happiness is all revolves around money, making money. Oh, sorry, gotta go. Yeah. No,
it's okay. I'm sorry. I didn't want to cut you off because I agree with what you're saying, and I think this is a good conversation. But I'm sorry, I have to run.
Yeah, no, that's same here. Yeah, I gotta
let's do this. Let's do this again another time. Maybe we'll talk about cars next time or not.
I was just gonna say that.
Usually people want me to talk about cars, so I'm happy to talk about Pearl Jam and politics with somebody. So I'm about this.
No, that's like I said, I'm very much like you and Rogan, where I go wherever the conversation takes us, and usually it ends up having good conversations, but I always do end up having pissed off fans. They're like, what the fuck, I had Pat Miletich on, and they're like, dude, you didn't talk about MMA once. I'm like, sorry,
that's okay. He probably talks about MMA with everybody else.
Exactly.
That's okay. You got your own angle. I like it. I'll fuck with that. That's cool.
Well,
thanks for having me on. I hate to hit and run. The Trump balloon it's from the Mad Dog Pack. It was like $35. This dude, Claude Taylor, I follow on Twitter, he broke a lot of the early Russia stuff like a long time ago, like a year before a lot of other people. And that's where I bought the Trump balloon from. It's really fun. But thanks for having me on, man. I hate to talk and run.
No problem. Yeah, no, I should have been keeping up at the time. But
it's okay. It was a good show.
Yeah. Thanks again, Matt. I really appreciate it. We'll keep in touch, and
right.
we'll talk again soon. Hopefully we'll talk about some watches and cars.
All right. Thanks, man. See you later.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.